Hey, what's up guys? In this video we're going to be talking about the installation of your TMG Alpha-15 laser jammers. We're going to go over primarily information about the heads, including how many heads you need in your car depending on where you drive and what guns you face, how they should be oriented and where they should be installed in your grill, and then we're also at the end going to touch briefly on a couple points regarding the CPU. So with that said, let's start with the heads. Now, as far as spacing for the heads, they generally recommend having the heads about 24 to 30 inches apart or so. If they're too close, they can actually interfere with one another, and if they're too far apart, it will leave some gaps in your install between the heads. So 24 to 30 inches is a good rule of thumb. 31 is kind of the limit they're saying, as far as that's when it starts to get too far apart, so good to know. Now, as far as how many heads, that depends on, well, two primary factors. Number one, how large your vehicle is. Larger vehicles have more surface area, so they'll require more heads to get complete coverage. And two, which guns you face. Some of the older, easier to jam guns may require fewer heads, while some of the newer, more difficult to jam guns will require 3 heads or more. Now, if you ride a motorcycle, luckily that's a really small vehicle, so you can actually get away with 1 head in the front, and if you want rear protection, you can do just 1 head in the rear. And that also applies to some of the tougher guns like the Dragon Eye, which is great. Now, if you drive a car, you can typically get away with 2 heads, and that's particularly true if you're facing some of the easier guns, so custom LTI guns, Laser Atlanta, etc. If you face any of the Dragon Eye guns, and these are, again, some of the tougher, more difficult to jam guns, and I'll list here where all people have reported them in use in the US as well as in Canada. If you're facing the Dragon Eye guns in a car, they recommend 3 heads minimum. For larger cars, it may be a good idea to go for 3 heads anyway, but you should be able to get away many times with just 2 heads, so that's cool. Now, if you're driving an SUV, such as maybe a smaller SUV or a crossover, you're definitely going to want 3 heads minimum no matter which guns you face. If you're driving a larger, like full-size SUV or a large truck, you're going to want 4 heads per side. And then as far as the general placement recommendations with the heads, you're just going to want them in your grill, and you're going to want them to have spread evenly to cover the primary target areas, including the headlights as well as the center mass, which is going to be basically the front license plate area, and they like to shoot in the front a lot of times even if you don't have a front plate, so you're going to want to make sure that's covered. So basically the center of the vehicle as well as the headlights, those are the main areas that you want to keep protected. Now, as far as the orientation of the head, it's very important to make sure that they're mounted straight and level. You do not want them pointed like toed in or toed out like this, and you don't want them aimed up and down. Make sure they're straight and level, and there's actually a bubble level tool that's included with the TMG, so make sure that you use that and you keep your heads mounted straight and level. Another key point is make sure that you don't install them behind anything, like even a mesh grill. Remember, they need to be able to see the light coming in from the laser gun and also be able to transmit it back out. So if you mount it behind anything, you're going to stop it from being able to function properly. So make sure they have a clear view of the road ahead. Now, if we take a closer look at the heads, you'll see we have a number of different bubbles. This big bubble right here, this is where the laser receiver is mounted behind, and then the laser transmitter is behind this middle smaller bubble right here. The smaller bubble on this side, opposite the big bubble, there's not actually anything behind there, which I explained in the main TMG video when they were experimenting with single and dual diode versions. These ones with the single diode, the transmitter is right here in this smaller head closer to the receiver. Now, as far as bubbles out versus bubbles in, I don't think it should make a huge difference. That was more of an issue with the older style laser jammers, which had really big heads, and usually people would do it bubbles out just to get better coverage for the headlights and then maybe move them in a little bit like that. Some people I've seen before will maybe flip bubbles in and then move the heads farther apart, but really with these ones it doesn't matter. I personally like to do bubbles out just because that's how we've always done it. But I guess the main thing is maybe aesthetics. I like to do bubbles out just for symmetry, but you can do either way. Now, as far as the orientation of the heads are designed to be installed horizontally like this. You're not going to want to install them vertically unless, for you guys maybe driving like a BMW or something, if you want to do a vertical installation because you have those vertical grill slats, you can do that so long as you have a third head in the middle that's oriented horizontally. So for you guys with vertical grills, if you want to do that, have the 2 outer heads, you can install them vertically like this, but make sure that you have a third head in the center mounted horizontally, and that way it'll work. But in general, horizontal placement is going to be the way to go. Now, as far as height on the grill, generally higher is better, and that's primarily so that when you're driving, if you're maybe cresting the top of a hill, you want to make sure that your laser jammers are able to see and return fire if the cop shoots you right as you come across the top of the hill. I've seen situations where people had it mounted super low, and you may need to depending on, the style of your car and stuff and the design. One of the issues is if it's mounted super low, the top of the car is going to be visible, but the jammers are still obscured, and that's why it's a good reason to have the heads mounted a little bit higher up. Now, as far as if the heads are mounted in like a V shape like this or like that, that should be okay with these ones. There's no reason why that would be an issue. So it's not like they have to all be mounted perfectly in line. So if maybe it would be better in your car to have the center head higher or lower or something, that would be okay. But again, you just want to make sure that you have adequate coverage in the center of the vehicle as well as out to the side for the headlight area. Now, moving on to the CPU, there's really not much to it here with the CPU. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got two options for your power ports. You've got one right there if you've got the hardwired one. If you have the cigarette lighter cable, you can plug that right in here to the side. Either one works fine. You don't need both. Now, as far as plugging the heads into the CPU, you'll see that there's 4 ports. They're labeled TP1 through TP4, so 4 different transponders, essentially. So the front ones will be plugged into 1 and 2, and then if you have more than 2 heads to plug in, they're going to go into ports 3 and 4. If you want ports 3 and 4 set up as front laser jammers, make sure you have the dip switches pointed down towards front. If you want ports 3 and 4 to be for your rear laser jammers, have the dip switches set to up for rear. Now, if you need more heads plugged in, the CPU actually supports a total of up to 8 heads total, even though there's only 4 ports here. They have a splitter cable that looks like this. Basically, this plugs into the back of the CPU, and then the splitter splits off like this and connects to 2 heads. So you can have up to 2 heads per port, and 4 heads total, so a total of up to 8 heads for the entire system. Now, moving on to the buttons here on the front of the CPU, for normal operation, you're going to want to make sure all the LEDs on the buttons are turned off. This way it's set up to detect and jam laser, and it will automatically shut off after 4 seconds. For more information about the rest of the buttons and what all this does, you can watch my other video where we go more hands-on with the CPU and I explain what all the buttons do and basically how all this stuff works. But in any event, yeah, there you go. There is a look as far as installing the laser jammer, where the heads should go in your car, how they should be oriented, how many to get, and then also how to use it. So, well, I guess not so much how to use it, basically how it plugs in. The how to use it stuff we'll cover in the other video. But yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions as far as installing onto your particular vehicle, the best thing to do is head over to RDF, the forums. You can actually post a picture of your car and people can actually give you placement suggestions on exactly where to install it into your vehicle. And I'll link down in the video description to where you can go to get suggestions for laser placement in your vehicle. So, awesome. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys have found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.